So, have you ever felt like you're on this constant search for happiness? Like it's some prize out there just beyond reach. That feeling of chasing something outside yourself.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly common. We're sort of conditioned to think happiness is a destination, right?
Yeah.
Or this feeling we need to grab onto. We end up measuring ourselves against some, I don't know, internal happiness meter.
Exactly. And well, this deep dive is all about flipping that whole idea on its head. We're digging into the thinking from the book, Happy is the New Healthy by Dr. Joan Neehall.
Yeah, our mission here is really to unpack these ideas, to understand what happiness really is, at least from this perspective. And importantly, why the way we usually go about it might actually be making us, well, less happy.
And figure out how you can maybe build a more lasting state of well-being.
That's the goal.
And the core idea, which honestly I find really interesting, is that happiness isn't something you just find out there. It's something you actually cultivate from within.
Right. Through, like, intentional habits and connections, often in ways you might not expect.
It makes me think of that old quote from Zhuangzi, something like, happiness is the absence of the striving for happiness.
That's it, exactly. That's the paradox we're talking about. We treat happiness like a thing to get, an achievement, a sort of never-ending quest for the next level up.
Yeah.
But as the book explores, you won't find that really sustainable happiness in, external stuff or even in other people necessarily.
It's internal.
It's internal. And look, it is accessible to everyone, but it does take conscious effort. You have to build it.
Okay, let's unpack that first big point then, the happiness hunt. Why chasing it doesn't work.
The book makes this really critical distinction right away about what happiness actually is versus what we often confuse it with.
Yes, exactly. True happiness, as it's discussed here, is more like a state of well-being, a sort of deep contentment. But we often mistake it for those fleeting emotions like pleasure or intense joy, which, by their nature, they come and they go. And that's where the paradox comes in, right? Trying too hard to force those temporary feelings, that actually makes us unhappy in the long run.
Precisely. When you're constantly chasing that feeling of joy, it starts to feel, well, manufactured, forced. And it just never sticks around. The effort itself kind of makes you lose sight of the deeper, more lasting state.
And the source argues we're constantly looking for this external manufactured happiness in places that just can't provide it long term, like tying it to material possessions or wealth.
Right. That temporary buzz you get from buying something or making a bit more money. It often doesn't last.
Yeah.
The book uses the example of Ron. He was constantly leasing luxury cars, buying his wife jewelry. And he admitted, I feel good, but it doesn't last.
It reminds me of that famous study, Kahneman and Deaton, right? Finding that emotional well-being kind of levels off.
Yeah, around $75,000 a year or something like that.
Beyond that point, more money doesn't significantly boost your day-to-day happiness, which tells you
Right.
money is crucial for basic needs, reducing stress.
Absolutely essential for that.
But it hits a ceiling when it comes to true well-being.
Exactly. It covers the foundations, but it's not the source of deep contentment itself.
Yeah.
What is interesting, though, is that people often get more satisfaction from using their resources for others, like donating or setting up a scholarship, that kind of thing.
Okay, what about relationships? Expecting happiness from a partner? Surely that's a natural place to look.
Well, the source is pretty clear on this. Expecting another person to provide you with complete happiness, that's basically setting yourself up for disappointment.
That's a lot of pressure on them.
Huge pressure. And maybe more importantly, it takes the focus off you. It kind of removes your own motivation to work on your situation and gives you someone else to blame, potentially, which just keeps fulfillment away.
And the idea of the perfect job, that dream role we chase.
That can also be a trap. If it's just about the external stuff, security, prestige, the real satisfaction, the book argues, often comes from being in a flow state. That feeling when you're totally immersed.
Yeah, totally absorbed.
Fueled by the work itself. Feeling challenged but capable. The author talks about her own move to private practice. It was a risk, sure, not necessarily the most secure path at first, but it was her dream. She felt like she was really operating at her best, and she was passionate about it.
So that's different from just chasing a title or a salary number.
It's completely different.
Okay, so if jobs, money, relationships, if they aren't the answer in themselves, what about distractions? Retail therapy, scrolling social media, even nice things like a spa weekend.
Yeah, the book doesn't say these things are inherently bad. I mean, a break or a treat can be great, but it points out they're often just temporary fixes. Or worse, Sometimes it's a conscious choice not to deal with the underlying discomfort, the stuff that's actually causing the distress.
So it depends on the why.
Exactly. Understanding why you're reaching for them. Is it a quick recharge before you tackle the real issues? Fine. But if it's a constant pattern of avoidance, then it's just another roadblock to deeper happiness.
Okay, so we've looked at why the chase itself doesn't work. But even if you stop chasing, there are these like hidden traps, things that actively block happiness. One that really jumped out at me was toxic positivity.
Oh, yeah. This is such an important one. It's that pressure, to perform happiness, to
Yeah.
push for this super optimistic mindset all the time. The danger is it often acts like a kind of denial. It forces you to repress difficult but very real emotions. Sadness, anxiety, anger.
Instead of actually processing them.
Right. You just stuff them down.
So it's not about being happy constantly, like a robot, but about having the ability, the capacity, to be present with the whole range of human emotion.
Exactly. A truly healthy mind needs emotional balance. You need to be able to process and learn from the tough stuff just as much as you welcome the good feelings. Pushing them away doesn't make them disappear. It just lets them fester.
Another major pitfall the source really digs into is the comparison trap.
Ugh, this one is so corrosive to well-being. Society basically conditions us, doesn't it?
Right.
To constantly measure ourselves against others based on these often arbitrary ideas of success, money, looks, possessions, how together someone seems.
It leads to that constant internal voice, I should have a bigger house, or I should be thinner, or I should have done more by now. That's shitting.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
And focusing all our energy outward on comparing.
Yeah.
It completely stops us from focusing inward on our own journey, our own improvement.
Yeah.
And social media, it's like pouring gasoline on this fire. It gives you this constant curated feed of everyone else's highlight reels. It makes comparison feel almost involuntary sometimes.
The book mentions Ollie, remember? Feeling overwhelmed comparing her blended family life.
Right, but then she started actively practicing gratitude.
Yeah.
And that helped her stop comparing and actually value her own life, her own time.
And Marilyn, too, who tied her self-worth to social media likes and comparisons.
But found way more life satisfaction when she consciously pulled back,
Yeah.
disengaged a bit.
These examples really show it's not about having what others have. It's about redirecting that energy inward.
Comparing yourself only to your past self, maybe. Celebrating your own progress, however small.
Loneliness and isolation are also huge roadblocks discussed. The book makes a useful distinction between them.
Yeah, it does. Loneliness is that subjective feeling of being disconnected. You could be in a crowd and still feel totally unseen or unheard.
Whereas isolation is more quantifiable.
Right. It's the actual lack of social contact.
Mm.
Infrequent interactions, few close friends. One's an internal state, the other's about external circumstances.
And the stats the book cites are pretty stark. Loneliness rates doubling in the U.S. over 50 years. Gen Z being the loneliest generation.
Wow. And loneliness often shows up as anxiety, depression, just feeling fundamentally disconnected from your own life. It hits people of all ages, all backgrounds. The author shares some really poignant personal stories about feeling lonely as a kid.
Yeah, not fitting in physically, being isolated because she did well in school, even feeling lonely because her shoes were different.
Those stories really drive home that loneliness is subjective. It's an internal experience.
And the powerful takeaway is that loneliness isn't just a bad feeling to endure. It should be seen as a vital signal.
A signal from within, yeah. A motivation to actually change your behavior, to actively reach out and try to connect.
But prolonged loneliness, isolation, unresolved emotional pain that can create fertile ground for negative addictions, right?
Sadly, yes. Very fertile ground.
We tend to think of addiction just in terms of substances, like drugs or alcohol.
Right. But the book, and this aligns with broader psychology, defines addiction more broadly. It's any habit or behavior that ends up having power over you. It could be drama, excessive spending, constantly needing external validation, even certain compulsive behaviors, things recognized in, psychological classifications.
And the basic brain science backs this up, the reward pathways getting hijacked.
Yeah, the brain gets a reward from these behaviors, which makes the habit incredibly hard to break, even when it's destructive.
The book gives examples. Carol's binge eating linked to her isolation.
Exactly. And Harry overcoming compulsive sexual activity by focusing his energy outward on community and charity work instead. The tragic part is that these negative addictions often push away the very people who could offer connection.
Worsening the isolation.
Right. Worsening the isolation that might have fueled the addiction in the first place. So letting go of that destructive habit is often the first necessary step towards filling that void in a healthy way.
Okay, so even when we understand these pitfalls, the chasing, the toxic positivity, comparison, loneliness, addiction, there are still often roadblocks, things that stop us from actually making the changes we want to make.
Absolutely. The book talks about environmental roadblocks first. Those are the external things. Factors in your surroundings that make the old unwanted behavior super easy and the new desired behavior really difficult.
Like having junk food right there in the cupboard when you're trying to eat healthy.
Exactly. Or feeling like you deserve that glass of wine after a tough day because the bottle's right there on the counter.
Or relying on fast food because it's convenient when you're stressed. The book mentions Belinda's spending, George's wine habit.
Yeah, Lauren's eating habits tied to stress and convenience. Your environment can really work against you if you're not careful.
And then there are the internal roadblocks, the self-sabotage stuff.
Like constant self-criticism. That negative self-talk, telling yourself, I'm such a failure if you slip up just once.
Or that quest for perfection, needing everything to be flawless instead of just focusing on making authentic progress.
Right. The author talks about her own struggle with being a maximizer, always needing the absolute best, and finding freedom and becoming a satisfier instead.
Accepting good enough.
Yeah, accepting good enough and moving on. So liberating.
And then there's self-deception, rationalizing, making excuses.
Always we avoid taking responsibility. Like the example of Richard, super qualified, but always putting off writing the book he dreamed of. He had everything else lined up, but his internal patterns kept blocking him.
And a big set of internal blocks are what psychologists call cognitive distortions. Those like inaccurate ways of thinking.
Yes, exactly. They're like systematic errors in how we process the world. Things like polarized thinking, seeing everything in black and white, all good or all bad, no middle ground.
Or personalization.
Right. Taking things personally that has nothing to do with you. Like Mark, feeling the company downsizing was somehow about him and his worth.
Or emotional reasoning, assuming something must be true just because you feel it strongly.
Yeah, I feel like a failure, therefore I'm a failure. Learning to spot these patterns in your own thinking and then challenge them is absolutely crucial.
Okay, so we know chasing happiness doesn't work. We've identified the big pitfalls and roadblocks. How do we actually make the shift? How do we move from chasing to being? How do we build this internal state?
Well, the core message here, I think, is that happiness isn't just luck. It can become a healthy habit. It's an internal state. It's accessible to everyone. But yeah, it takes conscious effort. It takes work.
And that effort often starts by looking inward, reaching inward.
Yes. A fundamental first step is self-attunement, which really just means learning to listen. Truly listen to your inner voice, your emotions, your body's signals, what you actually need. It's a building block not just for understanding yourself, but for actually being able to empathize and connect authentically with other people too.
The book also really emphasizes solitude, making it clear this is not the same as loneliness.
Absolutely not. Totally different things. Solitude is intentional time alone. And it actually has tremendous benefits. It lets you reframe challenges. It fosters introspection, boosts creativity, helps with planning, reduces stress. It's about gaining clarity and recharging, away from all the external noise.
So it's fundamentally different from that painful feeling of unwanted disconnection that is loneliness.
Completely different.
Mindfulness and meditation also come up as powerful tools for this inward focus.
Yeah, the research is pretty solid on this. Even short periods, maybe just 10 minutes a day, can significantly lift your mood, improve your concentration, and even enhance your capacity for social connection.
And something really simple, really accessible is just deep breathing.
Something as basic as conscious, diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing, can physically calm your nervous system. It reduces anxiety, brings you back to the present moment, which is essential, really, for that self-attunement we were talking about.
Okay, so looking inward is crucial. But building happiness also requires actively reaching outward, doesn't it?
Absolutely key. And the important point here is that reestablishing connection is an active choice. It's not something that just happens to you passively. The good news is you probably don't have to start from zero. Focus first on nurturing the positive relationships you already have. Making that choice to reach out is incredibly powerful.
The source brings up the idea of third places. Remember that. Spaces outside home and work.
Right, like cafes, parks, community centers, places where social connection can happen more organically. That concept from Ray Oldenburg.
And acknowledging, of course, that digital platforms became vital third places for many during times like the pandemic.
For sure. But the core thing is the emotional engagement. Feeling a sense of belonging with others who share your interests or values. That's critical.
The author's story about connecting with her friend Ingrid, feeling truly seen and present, that really illustrated it for me.
It's a beautiful example, isn't it? It wasn't about doing anything spectacular, just being there, truly seen and heard.
Yeah.
And that touches on what we fundamentally crave in interactions.
Mhm.
Did you hear me? Did you see me? Did what I say mean anything to you? That feeling of being acknowledged is just incredibly powerful for a connection.
And how you respond to someone else's good news, that matters more than you might think, right?
It's surprisingly important.
Huh.
The book breaks down different response types. The active constructive response, where you're genuinely enthusiastic, ask questions, really engage with their good news, that's the one that boosts the relationship the most, much more than just a passive, oh, nice.
Interesting. Okay, another concept that sounded, well, odd at first was developing positive addictions.
Yeah, it sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? But according to William Glasser's criteria, which the book uses, a positive addiction is basically a non-competitive activity you choose, usually done for about an hour a day. It's something psychologically or physically beneficial, and it becomes a source of strength and energy for you. It's about channeling that human tendency for habits into something good.
So it's like reframing it. Instead of I have to exercise, it's I get to move my body.
Exactly. That shift in mindset is key. The book talks about different pathways to find these positive addictions. There's cerebral intellectual stuff, blue and green being outdoors, in nature, near water, and kinship activities focused on connection and relationships.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Andrew, the minister, found his through kinship, making intentional time for real one-on-one connections with parishioners. Roger found his through blue and green, getting into flow states, just being out in nature. And Angela used a mix of cerebral and kinship, finding energy by connecting with other successful women who shared her intellectual drive.
And these positive addictions can help fill that gigantic hole, as the book calls it, that often comes from disconnection and negative habits.
Yes, precisely. They provide a healthy alternative source of fulfillment and strength.
Okay, so finally, the source offers some really practical strategies for actually making these changes, breaking old patterns, building new ones.
Yeah, specific action steps, like allowing yourself a small reward even for just partially completing a new habit, or temporarily lowering your expectations if the goal feels overwhelming.
Or just tweaking the goal for the day if a roadblock pops up instead of giving up entirely.
And crucially, recognizing that roadblocks will happen. It's inevitable. The important shift is not asking, why am I failing again?
Yeah.
But, okay, how can I use this obstacle? What does it tell me? How can I use it to move forward? It's about building resilience.
There's also that simple habit-breaking rule, just doing something different right at the start of the usual chain of events to interrupt the autopilot.
And the ordeal, making the old negative behavior significantly more difficult or costly than changing.
Like Joe, the gambler, deciding he'd have to donate money to a political group he hated if he slipped up.
Exactly. Raising the stakes on the unwanted behavior.
And the book briefly touches on transactional analysis, Eric Berne's model, child, parent, adult ego states.
Right. The main takeaway there is the importance of engaging your adult state. That's the rational, problem-solving part of you. Making informed decisions about your behavior from that place, rather than reacting automatically from the emotional child state or the rigid, rule-following parent state. It's about conscious choice, based on awareness.
All of this feels especially relevant when we're navigating big disruptions. The book uses the COVID-19 pandemic as a major example, showing how huge challenges, while incredibly difficult, can also be catalysts for change.
Right. That Greek idea of chaos, holding both danger and opportunity. Times of stress or confinement obviously put huge strain on relationships. Boundaries blur. The book points out common toxic communication patterns, criticism, stonewalling, shutting down, defensiveness, contempt. John Gottman called them the four horsemen. They really erode relationships.
And it suggests tools like the ABC method as a way to handle conflict better.
Yes. Stating your affected state, how you feel, I feel hurt, describing the specific behaviors when you interrupt me, and explaining the impact using clear communication, because it makes me feel like my opinion doesn't matter. It provides a structure for difficult conversations.
And building resilience during tough times often involves looking back, right? Recognizing coping strategies you've used successfully before.
Exactly. Building up that internal toolbox of strategies, work for you so you're better equipped for future challenges.
The book keeps coming back to this powerful point. While genetics play a role in our baseline happiness, maybe 50%,
Our habits and choices account for a huge chunk of the rest. Arguably the other 50%. We have agency here.
We can actually choose to build habits that boost our well-being.
Definitely. The book lists several others too. Things like journaling, consciously reframing challenges into stories that include solutions.
Constructive complaining, where you bring a solution along with the problem.
Yeah. And savoring positive moments, finding those flow states we talked about, regular exercise, prioritizing good sleep. All these things add up.
And finally, the book ends on this hopeful note, suggesting that maybe navigating collective challenges like the pandemic could spur a shift
Towards a greater sense of global identity, valuing cooperation, the well-being of others.
Yeah.
Happiness often follows when we turn outwards and contribute when we give back.
So we've journeyed quite a bit in this deep dive, from that common idea of chasing happiness externally.
Exploring the pitfalls that block us, comparison, loneliness, those internal roadblocks.
And arriving at this perspective of building happiness from within through intentional habits, self-awareness, and meaningful connection.
Yeah, the key takeaways really seem to be true happiness is an internal job, something you cultivate. Resisting that comparison trap is vital. Loneliness is a signal. Listen to it, act on it, connect.
Yeah.
Negative habits can be replaced with positive ones.
And even when life throws curveballs, you have significant power through your choices and the habits you nurture.
Yes.
So, if happy is the new healthy, maybe the question for you listening is, how can you use a current challenge in your life, not just as something to endure, but as a catalyst for cultivating your own internal state of happiness?
Or thinking about that chaos idea, danger and opportunity. What's one small habit or maybe one intentional connection you could choose to focus on today just to start building that well-being for yourself?